The storm raged across the planet Xerion Prime with a fury that even the native creatures feared. Lightning split the purple sky in brilliant white veins, each bolt carrying enough energy to power a small city. In the middle of this chaos, something magnificent and terrifying fell from the heavens. Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands and looked up from the broken cargo hauler he'd been fixing. The sound that cut through the thunder wasn't like anything he'd heard before. It was part roar, part scream, and entirely alien. His small repair shop sat on the edge of the human mining colony, where most people wouldn't venture during the daily storms that plagued this world. The crash shook the ground so hard that tools fell from his workbench. Marcus grabbed his emergency kit and headed toward the source of the disturbance. As the colony's only certified xenotech mechanic, he'd seen plenty of strange alien technology, but nothing had prepared him for what he found in the smoking crater. The creature was massive, easily the size of a small shuttle. Its scales shimmered between deep emerald and midnight black, each one as large as Marcus's hand. 4 powerful legs ended in claws that could tear through titanium plating, and wings that spanned at least 30 meters lay crumpled and smoking. The most striking feature was its head, elongated and majestic, with intelligent eyes that glowed like molten gold. This was a Draconis Supremus, one of the apex predators from the Andromeda sector. Marcus had only seen them in military briefings, usually as warnings about worlds to avoid. They were known to be highly intelligent, incredibly dangerous, and completely hostile to all other species. This one appeared to be dying. Lightning had struck it directly, leaving burn patterns across its hide that told a story of incredible pain. The dragon's breathing was labored, each exhale producing small puffs of what looked like steam. One wing was clearly broken, twisted at an angle that made Marcus wince. Worse, he could see where other dragons had attacked it, leaving deep gashes that still bled a silver-blue fluid. The smart thing would be to walk away. Colony regulations were clear about dangerous xenofauna. The safe thing would be to call the authorities and let them deal with it. The human thing, Marcus realized, was to help. He approached slowly, hands visible and empty. The dragon's massive head turned toward him, those golden eyes focusing with obvious effort. There was intelligence there, and something else Marcus hadn't expected to see in such a fearsome creature: fear. "Easy there, big guy," Marcus said softly, the way he might talk to a wounded animal back on Earth. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dragon tried to lift its head, but the effort was too much. It collapsed back into the mud with a sound that was almost like a whimper. Marcus could see the exact moment when the creature made a decision. Instead of trying to attack or flee, it simply watched him with those incredible eyes. Marcus knelt beside the massive head, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from the dragon's scales. Up close, he could see that the creature was even more badly hurt than he'd first thought. The lightning strike had burned through several scales, exposing raw flesh underneath. The wounds from other dragons were deep enough that they would need immediate attention if the creature was going to survive. "What did they do to you?" Marcus whispered, examining the claw marks. They were too precise to be from a fight. These wounds had been inflicted deliberately, methodically. "They cast you out, didn't they?" The dragon's eyes flickered, and Marcus could have sworn he saw understanding there. In the Dragon Society he'd read about in the military files, exile was a fate worse than death. Dragons who were cast out were forbidden from ever returning to their kind, marked as outcasts and left to die alone. Marcus made his decision. He couldn't move a creature this size to his workshop, but he could bring his tools here. The storm was getting worse, which meant he had maybe an hour before the really dangerous lightning started. He ran back to his shop and gathered everything he thought might help: medical gel designed for alien physiology, portable power tools, and his portable shelter generator. When he returned, the dragon hadn't moved, but its eyes tracked his movements with obvious interest. Marcus set up the shelter generator first, creating a protective dome over both of them. The sound of rain on the energy field was oddly comforting. "This might hurt," Marcus warned, though he wasn't sure the dragon could understand him. He started with the lightning burns, carefully cleaning each wound and applying the medical gel. The dragon tensed but didn't try to stop him. If anything, it seemed to relax as Marcus worked. The process took hours. Marcus had to be incredibly careful not to damage any of the dragon's natural bioelectric systems. Their scales weren't just armor, they were also part of an incredibly sophisticated sensory network. Each one he treated had to be done with precision that would make a surgeon proud. As he worked, Marcus found himself talking to the dragon. He explained what he was doing, told stories about his life on Earth, and shared his thoughts about this strange world they both found themselves on. The dragon listened to every word, its golden eyes never leaving Marcus's face. When Marcus finally moved to examine the broken wing, the dragon shifted slightly to give him better access. The trust implicit in that small movement hit Marcus harder than he'd expected. This creature, which could easily kill him with a single swipe of its claws, was choosing to trust a human it had just met. The wing was badly damaged, but not beyond repair. Marcus had worked on atmospheric craft before, and the basic principles were the same. He carefully realigned the broken bones and used a biocompatible bonding agent to hold them in place. The dragon remained perfectly still throughout the process, though Marcus could see the strain in its eyes. By the time he finished with the immediate medical care, the storm was beginning to pass. The worst of the lightning had moved on, leaving behind a steady rain that helped wash away the evidence of the dragon's crash. Marcus sat back on his heels, exhausted but satisfied with his work. "You're going to need time to heal," he told the dragon, "and you'll need food. I don't suppose you're interested in processed protein bars." The dragon's response was a sound that might have been amusement. For the first time since Marcus had found it, the creature seemed truly relaxed. It lowered its massive head to rest on the ground, but kept those golden eyes fixed on the human who had chosen to help rather than harm. Marcus gathered his tools and prepared to head back to his shop. He needed to figure out how to explain the massive crater to the colony administrators, and he needed to research what dragons actually ate. More importantly, he needed to decide what he was going to do with his new patient. As he reached the edge of the shelter, the dragon made a sound that was unmistakably a call for attention. Marcus turned back to find those golden eyes watching him with an intensity that made him feel like he was being measured somehow. "I'll be back," Marcus promised. "I won't leave you here alone." The dragon's only response was to close its eyes, but Marcus could have sworn he saw something like gratitude in that simple gesture. As he walked back through the rain toward his workshop, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't begin to imagine. The next morning brought clear skies and difficult questions. Colony Administrator Williams stood in Marcus's shop with her arms crossed and a skeptical expression on her face. "You want me to believe that you spent 6 hours in a lightning storm fixing what you claim was a damaged atmospheric processor?" she asked. "That's right," Marcus lied smoothly. He'd had all night to prepare his story. Emergency protocols required immediate action to prevent environmental contamination. Williams wasn't buying it, but she also couldn't prove he was lying. The crater was still there, but Marcus had used his fabrication tools to create convincing wreckage from an atmospheric processor. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to maintain his cover story. After Williams left with a warning about proper reporting procedures, Marcus loaded his hover sled with supplies and headed back to his patient. He'd spent most of the night researching dragon dietary requirements and had managed to acquire several kilograms of raw mineral supplements that should provide proper nutrition. The dragon was awake when Marcus arrived, and it seemed more alert than it had the night before. The wounds were already showing signs of healing, which spoke to the incredible resilience of the species. Marcus set up his portable shelter again and began checking his work from the previous night. "You heal fast," he observed, carefully examining the wing repairs. "The bonding agent has already begun integrating with your natural bone structure. That's remarkable." The dragon watched his every movement with obvious interest. When Marcus pulled out the mineral supplements, those golden eyes focused on the containers with unmistakable hunger. "I did some research," Marcus explained as he arranged the supplements on a clean tarp. "Your species needs specific trace elements that aren't found in standard protein sources. This should help with the healing process." The dragon's response was immediate and enthusiastic. It devoured the supplements with obvious relish, and Marcus could see some of the tension leave its massive frame as proper nutrition began to work its way through its system. Over the following days, a routine developed. Marcus would complete his regular repair work in the morning, then spend his afternoons with the dragon. Each day brought visible improvements in the creature's condition, but more importantly, it brought something Marcus hadn't expected: friendship. The dragon was incredibly intelligent, far more so than the military briefings had suggested. It seemed to understand everything Marcus said, and it had developed its own ways of communicating. A particular tilt of its massive head meant confusion. A specific rumbling sound indicated contentment. When it was amused by something Marcus said, its eyes would actually seem to sparkle. Marcus began bringing books and technical manuals to read aloud during the dragon's recovery. The creature seemed particularly interested in engineering texts, paying close attention when Marcus explained mechanical principles or described complex systems. It was during one of these sessions that Marcus first began to suspect there was more to his patient than he'd initially realized. "You understand this, don't you?" Marcus asked one afternoon, as he explained the principles behind quantum field generators. "This isn't just interesting to you. You actually comprehend the technical aspects." The dragon's response was to carefully extend one massive claw and trace a complex equation in the mud. It was a quantum field equation, but with modifications that Marcus had never seen before. Modifications that, as he worked through the math, appeared to be significant improvements on human technology. Marcus stared at the equation, then at the dragon, then back at the equation. The implications were staggering. Not only was this creature intelligent enough to understand human technology, but it possessed knowledge that could advance human science by decades. "Where did you learn this?" Marcus whispered. The dragon's only response was to trace another equation, this one even more complex than the first. Marcus spent the rest of the afternoon frantically copying the calculations into his personal data pad, his mind racing with possibilities. That night, Marcus lay awake staring at the ceiling of his small living quarters. Everything he thought he knew about dragons was wrong. The military briefings had described them as savage predators, barely more intelligent than wild animals. But the creature he'd been caring for was clearly far more advanced than most species humanity had encountered, which raised the question, why had its own kind cast it out? The answer to Marcus's question came sooner than he expected. On the 7th day of the dragon's recovery, they were interrupted by a sound that made Marcus's blood run cold. The deep, resonant calls of approaching dragons echoed across the valley, and Marcus could see his patient's entire body tense with what could only be described as terror. 3 massive shapes descended from the clouds, their wings casting enormous shadows across the landscape. These dragons were even larger than Marcus's patient, their scales gleaming like polished obsidian. They landed with ground-shaking force just outside the shelter, their golden eyes fixed on the injured dragon with unmistakable hostility. Marcus stepped protectively in front of his patient, even though he knew the gesture was probably useless. The lead dragon, distinguished by intricate silver markings along its neck, spoke in a voice that resonated like controlled thunder. The exile continues to pollute this world with its presence, the lead dragon said, and Marcus was shocked to discover he could understand every word. And it has corrupted a lesser species with its heretical ideas. Heretical ideas? Marcus found his voice despite his fear. What are you talking about? The dragon's massive head swung toward Marcus, and those golden eyes examined him with obvious disdain. You are the human who has interfered with our justice. The exile was cast out for spreading dangerous thoughts among our young. Ideas about cooperation with inferior species, about sharing our knowledge with those too primitive to understand it. Marcus felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. His patient hadn't been exiled for violence or aggression. It had been cast out for believing that dragons should work with other species instead of dominating them. The equations it had shared weren't just demonstrations of intelligence. They were acts of rebellion against everything dragon society stood for. Your patient, the lead dragon continued, believes that our sacred knowledge should be shared freely, that we should lower ourselves to work alongside species like yours. Such thinking is corruption of the highest order. Behind Marcus, his patient made a sound that was definitely defiant. Despite being outnumbered and still recovering from serious injuries, the exiled dragon was not backing down from its beliefs. You're wrong, Marcus said, surprising himself with his boldness. Sharing knowledge makes everyone stronger. Your patient has already shown me advances that could benefit both our species. The lead dragon's laugh was like grinding stone. Precisely the kind of naive thinking that proves your inferiority. Knowledge is power, and power shared is power lost. The exile has contaminated you with its weakness. It's not weakness, Marcus shot back. It's wisdom. My patient understands something you don't. Cooperation creates possibilities that isolation never could. The three dragons exchanged glances that spoke of long-held beliefs being challenged by uncomfortable truths. The lead dragon stepped closer, its massive head looming over Marcus. You will cease your interference, human. The exile will die as justice demands, and you will forget whatever corrupted knowledge it has shared with you. No, Marcus said simply. The word hung in the air like a challenge. The dragon's eyes widened in obvious shock. No lesser species had ever directly defied them before. Did you just refuse a direct order from the Dragon Council? The lead dragon asked, its voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I refused an unjust demand, Marcus replied, his fear giving way to anger. You want to kill someone for believing that different species can work together. That's not justice. That's just fear dressed up as tradition. Behind him, Marcus heard his patient struggle to its feet. Despite its injuries, despite being outnumbered, the exiled dragon moved to stand beside Marcus in a gesture of solidarity that spoke louder than words. The lead dragon's eyes narrowed dangerously. You choose to stand with the exile against the wisdom of centuries? I choose to stand with my friend, Marcus said firmly. What happened next defied every piece of military intelligence humanity had ever gathered about dragon behavior. The three council dragons didn't attack. Instead, they stepped back, their expressions shifting from anger to something that might have been uncertainty. Friend? The lead dragon repeated, as if the word was foreign. That's right, Marcus said, reaching up to place a hand on his patient's scaled neck. This dragon saved my life by trusting me with knowledge that could advance human technology by decades. In return, I've provided medical care and companionship. We've shared stories, worked through complex problems together, and developed mutual respect. That's what friendship looks like. The dragon beside Marcus made a low rumbling sound that Marcus had learned meant agreement. Then, to Marcus's amazement, it began to speak in the same resonant language the council dragons used. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but he could hear the passion in his friend's voice. The exiled dragon was making its case, explaining its beliefs about cooperation and shared knowledge. As it spoke, Marcus noticed something remarkable happening. The council dragon's aggressive postures began to soften slightly. When his friend finished speaking, silence stretched across the valley. The lead council dragon stared at Marcus and his patient for a long moment, its golden eyes unreadable. "The exile claims that you have already begun proving its theories," the lead dragon finally said. "That cooperation between your species has produced results neither could achieve alone." "That's true," Marcus said. "Your friend has helped me understand principles of biointegration that human science hasn't discovered yet. In return, I've shared human approaches to mechanical engineering that complement dragon biological systems. Together, we've designed theoretical improvements to both technologies." Marcus pulled out his datapad and showed them the calculations he and his friend had worked out together. Hybrid designs that combined human engineering precision with dragon bioelectric systems. Power generators that were more efficient than anything either species had developed independently. Spacecraft designs that could function in ways previously thought impossible. The council dragons examined the data with obvious interest, their hostility gradually giving way to scientific curiosity. Marcus could see the exact moment when they began to understand what his friend had been trying to tell them. "These designs are theoretically sound," the second council dragon admitted reluctantly. "But theory is not practice." "Then let us prove it in practice," Marcus said. "Give us a chance to demonstrate what cooperation can accomplish. If we fail, then maybe your exile was justified. But if we succeed, then maybe it's time to reconsider some very old assumptions." The three dragons conferred in their own language, their conversation growing heated at times. Marcus's friend listened intently, occasionally adding comments that seemed to surprise the council members. Finally, the lead dragon turned back to Marcus. "The exile has requested an unprecedented arrangement, a formal cooperation between human and dragon to test these theories. Such a thing has never been attempted in our history. Maybe it's time to make history instead of just repeating it," Marcus suggested. The lead dragon's expression was impossible to read. "You would risk your life on an untested partnership with a being your own species considers monstrous?" Marcus looked at his friend, remembering the trust in those golden eyes when he had first approached the crash site. "I'm not risking my life. I'm betting on it." After more discussion, the council dragons reached their decision. The exile would be granted a temporary reprieve, but only under specific conditions. Marcus and his friend would have one standard planetary cycle to demonstrate the practical value of their cooperation. They would be allowed to work together on a project that could benefit both species. But if they failed to produce meaningful results, the exile would be permanent and final. As the council dragons prepared to leave, the lead dragon fixed Marcus with one final stare. "You have chosen a difficult path. Human. Dragon-human cooperation has been forbidden for reasons that go back to the earliest days of our civilization. You may discover that some barriers exist for good reason." "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But some barriers exist just because no one has been brave enough to tear them down." After the council dragons departed, Marcus and his friend were left alone with the weight of what they had committed to. The dragon's injuries had healed enough for limited mobility, but it was still far from full strength. They had less than a year to prove that everything both species believed about cooperation was wrong. "So what do we work on first?" Marcus asked, as he helped his friend settle back into the shelter. The dragon's response was to trace a new set of equations in the dirt. These were different from the previous ones, focused on practical applications rather than pure theory. Marcus studied them carefully, his excitement growing as he began to understand what his friend was proposing. A hybrid power core that combines human fusion technology with dragon bioelectric systems, Marcus breathed. The energy output would be incredible, and the efficiency ratings are off any scale I've ever seen. His friend rumbled agreement, then added another set of calculations that showed how such a system could be implemented. It was brilliant, elegant, and completely revolutionary. It was also the kind of project that could take months to design properly and years to build. We're going to need help, Marcus realized. More resources than I have access to, and probably some official backing from the colony administration. The dragon tilted its massive head in the gesture Marcus had learned meant curiosity. I'm going to have to tell them the truth, Marcus explained. About you, about what we're trying to do, about everything. Are you ready for humans to know that you exist? The dragon considered this for a long moment, then made a sound that Marcus interpreted as determined acceptance. They were committed now. Both of them. There was no going back to the simple life of hiding and healing. That evening, Marcus sat in his quarters composing the most important message of his life. He was writing to Colony Administrator Williams, but he knew the message would eventually reach Earth itself. In it, he carefully explained everything that had happened, from the crash to the Council Dragon's visit to the project they were proposing. He attached the hybrid power core designs, knowing they alone would be enough to get attention from the highest levels of human government. But more importantly, he included his personal observations about dragon intelligence, culture, and the potential for meaningful cooperation between species. This could change everything, he wrote in his conclusion. Not just the way we generate power or design spacecraft, but the way we think about our place in the galaxy. We have an opportunity to form the first formal alliance between humans and dragons. We just need the courage to take it. Marcus sent the message before he could lose his nerve, then walked back out to check on his friend. The dragon was awake, watching the stars with those remarkable golden eyes. Tomorrow everything changes, Marcus said as he settled down beside the massive head. Are you ready? The dragon's response was a warm rumble that Marcus had learned meant contentment and trust. Whatever came next, they would face it together. For the first time in dragon history, one of their kind had found a true friend among the humans. For the first time in human history, they had been offered a partnership with beings far more advanced than themselves. The real work was just beginning. The response to Marcus's message came faster than he had expected, and from higher up the chain of command than he had dared to hope. 3 days after sending his report, a military transport landed at the colony carrying a full diplomatic team, several xenobiology specialists, and enough security personnel to handle a small war. Marcus watched the landing with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. His friend, who had taken to calling itself Zephyr in the human language, observed the proceedings with obvious interest. The dragon's recovery had progressed remarkably well, and it was now mobile enough to demonstrate its capabilities if needed. They brought a lot of guns for a diplomatic mission, Marcus observed. Zephyr's response was a sound that Marcus had learned meant amusement mixed with understanding. Your species is cautious when dealing with potential threats. This is wisdom, though perhaps unnecessary in this instance. The fact that Zephyr could now speak fluent English was just one of many surprises that had emerged during their partnership. Dragons, it turned out, were incredibly adaptable linguists, able to master new languages with remarkable speed. Zephyr had been listening to Marcus's speech patterns since their first meeting and had gradually developed the ability to communicate directly. The diplomatic team was led by Ambassador Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus despite sharing a surname. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Her first meeting with Marcus took place in the colony's main conference room, with enough recording equipment to document every word. Mr. Chen, she began, your report has caused quite a stir back on Earth. Before we proceed, I need to confirm that everything you've described is accurate. Every word, Marcus assured her. Would you like me to introduce you to Zephyr? The ambassador's carefully controlled expression flickered slightly. Despite all the reports and video evidence Marcus had provided, actually meeting a dragon was still an intimidating prospect for most humans. "Yes," she said after a moment. "I believe that would be necessary." The introduction took place in the valley where Marcus had first found Zephyr. The diplomatic team approached with obvious caution, their security detail maintaining a respectful but ready distance. Zephyr had positioned itself carefully, lying down to appear less threatening, while still maintaining the dignity befitting a creature of its stature. "Ambassador Chen," Marcus said formally, "I'd like you to meet Zephyr, formerly of the Dragon Council territories, currently my research partner and friend." Zephyr raised its magnificent head and spoke in a voice like controlled thunder. "Ambassador Chen, I greet you in the spirit of cooperation and mutual respect. I hope this meeting will mark the beginning of a new era for both our species." The ambassador's professional composure held, but Marcus could see the amazement in her eyes. Whatever she had expected from a dragon, the reality of Zephyr's intelligence and eloquence was clearly beyond her preparation. "The honor is mine," Ambassador Chen replied, her diplomatic training taking over. "I bring greetings from the United Earth government and an offer of formal negotiations." What followed was the most unusual diplomatic session in human history. Zephyr proved to be a skilled negotiator, understanding both the potential and the limitations of the situation. The dragon explained its exile in detail, describing a society bound by ancient traditions that viewed cooperation with other species as weakness. "My people believe that sharing our knowledge diminishes our power," Zephyr explained. "They see the universe as a competition where only the strongest survive. But I have observed that cooperation creates strength that no individual can achieve alone." The ambassador's team of specialists asked detailed questions about dragon society, technology, and capabilities. Zephyr answered with remarkable openness, sharing information that completely revised human understanding of dragon civilization. Dragons, it turned out, possessed technology that was millions of years ahead of human development. They had mastered bioengineering to such a degree that their bodies were essentially living spacecraft, capable of interstellar travel without external life support. Their cities were grown rather than built, incorporating living systems that maintained themselves for millennia. "Why haven't you expanded beyond your home territories?" one of the specialists asked. "Expansion requires cooperation with other species," Zephyr replied. "Such cooperation is forbidden under our current social structure. We have remained isolated by choice, believing ourselves superior to all other forms of life." It was during these discussions that the true scope of the opportunity became clear. Dragons possessed the knowledge to solve humanity's greatest challenges: energy generation, faster-than-light travel, life extension, environmental restoration. All were well within dragon capabilities. But they had never shared this knowledge because they viewed other species as unworthy. "What would it take to change their minds?" Ambassador Chen asked. "Proof," Zephyr said simply. "A demonstration that cooperation produces results superior to isolation. The hybrid power core that Marcus and I have designed is just the beginning. If we can build it successfully, it will prove that human-dragon partnership has practical value." The negotiations continued for days, with messages flying back and forth between the colony and Earth. Marcus found himself at the center of discussions that would reshape humanity's future. His simple act of helping an injured creature had become the foundation for the most important diplomatic breakthrough in human history. The decision to proceed came from the highest levels of Earth's government. Humanity would commit resources to the hybrid power core project, treating it as a proof of concept for broader cooperation with dragon civilization. Marcus would serve as the primary human liaison, working directly with Zephyr to oversee the project. The construction took place in a specially built facility that accommodated both human technology and dragon bioengineering. Marcus watched in amazement as Zephyr demonstrated capabilities he had never imagined. The dragon could interface directly with biological systems, guiding growth processes with precision that made human manufacturing look crude by comparison. The power core itself was unlike anything either species had built before. The fusion reactor at its heart was pure human engineering, designed for maximum efficiency and safety. But the bioelectric conversion systems that surrounded it were living tissue, grown under Zephyr's direction to specifications that existed nowhere in human science. The biological components will adapt to changing conditions, Zephyr explained as they watched the systems integrate. Unlike mechanical parts, they will actually improve their performance over time as they learn the optimal energy pathways. The first successful test run produced power outputs that exceeded their most optimistic projections. The hybrid core generated 3 times more energy than a comparable human fusion reactor, with efficiency ratings that approached theoretical maximums. More importantly, it did so with complete stability, the biological components automatically adjusting to maintain perfect balance. News of the success spread quickly through both human space and through channels Marcus didn't fully understand to the Dragon Council territories. The response from humanity was immediate and enthusiastic. Plans were already underway for larger projects based on the hybrid technology principles. The Dragon response was more complex. A week after the successful test, 5 Council dragons arrived at the colony. Unlike the hostile visit months earlier, this delegation came as official representatives seeking formal discussions. Marcus and Zephyr met them in the same valley where their friendship had begun. The lead dragon was the same one who had initially demanded Zephyr's death, but its attitude had undergone a remarkable transformation. "The exile's theories have proven correct," the council leader acknowledged. "The hybrid technology you have created exceeds the capabilities of either species working alone. This success forces us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about cooperation with other species." Zephyr's response was gracious but firm. "I am no longer in exile. I have found a new home among the humans and a partnership that honors both species equally. If the Council wishes to explore cooperation, they must do so as equals, not as superior beings offering charity to lesser creatures." The negotiations that followed established the framework for the first formal alliance between humans and dragons. Trade agreements were signed, exchanging human manufacturing capabilities for dragon biological engineering knowledge. Cultural exchange programs were established, allowing members of both species to study each other's civilizations. Marcus found himself appointed as the first human ambassador to dragon space, with Zephyr serving as his counterpart representing dragon interests among humans. Their partnership, which had begun with simple medical care in a lightning storm, had become the foundation for a new era of galactic cooperation. The changes came quickly once formal relations were established. Human colonies began incorporating dragon biotechnology, creating self-sustaining habitats that could adapt to any environment. Dragon territories saw their first human visitors in millions of years, bringing fresh perspectives on problems that had seemed unsolvable. The hybrid power cores became standard equipment on both human and dragon vessels, enabling exploration of previously unreachable regions of space. Joint expeditions discovered new worlds, new species, and new possibilities for cooperation that neither civilization could have imagined alone. But perhaps the most significant change was in the way both species viewed the universe. Humans learned that intelligence took forms far beyond their own, and that cooperation could achieve wonders that competition never could. Dragons discovered that sharing knowledge multiplied rather than diminished their power, and that diversity of thought was strength rather than weakness. Marcus often returned to the valley where he had first found Zephyr, now marked by a monument commemorating the beginning of human-dragon cooperation. The crater from that first crash landing had been preserved as a reminder of how small acts of kindness could reshape entire civilizations. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked Zephyr during one of their visits. "Leaving your own people to build something new with us?" Zephyr's golden eyes sparkled with the amusement Marcus had learned to recognize. "I did not leave my people. I expanded the definition of what my people means. Dragons and humans, working together, have become something greater than either species was alone." As they watched the sun set over the valley, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a simple decision to help rather than harm, to trust rather than fear. That decision had grown into the greatest alliance in galactic history. The universe, as it turned out, was far more interesting when you had friends to explore it with, and sometimes the most unlikely friendships produced the most extraordinary results. Years later, when historians studied the beginning of the galactic cooperative era, they would trace it back to a lightning storm on a forgotten mining world. They would document the technical specifications of hybrid biotechnology and the diplomatic protocols that enabled interspecies cooperation. But the heart of the story would always be simpler than all the complexities that followed. Sometimes, the most important thing you can do is help someone who needs it, regardless of how different they might seem. Sometimes, the greatest advances in civilization come not from conquest or competition, but from the simple decision to extend a hand in friendship. Marcus Chen, a human mechanic on a remote mining world, had made that decision during a storm. The universe had never been the same since.